So, there's this fountain in the city of Kuttenberg in the game Kingdom Come Deliverance II. It's not the first time there's been a fountain in a medieval fantasy game, obviously, but when you walk up to this fountain, it triggers a little line of dialogue where the main character, Henry, says, quote,
"Fountain?
Excuse me.
Where does the water come from?"
And it doesn't just happen once. The game prompts you to hear that line of dialogue almost every single time you come near this fountain, even though there doesn't appear to be any real reason for it. And about the 10th time that I walked by this fountain and I heard that line, I thought to myself, you know what? Where is the water coming from? And why does the game want me to care so much? So naturally, I decided to figure it out. But what exactly am I looking for? Well, my first thought was that there should be some kind of pipe or maybe an aqueduct leading to the fountain providing water. If we find that, we can just follow it backwards all the way to its source, just like we do for any river. It really shouldn't be any more complicated than that, but obviously it is, because when I sat down to look around the fountain for any kind of water intake system, I didn't see one. There are little drains coming out of the side and some scaffolding to help people gather water from the fountain, but no pipes, pipes actually is really the only thing I was looking for. And frankly, this is totally normal for a video game. You don't actually have to create the plumbing to make a fountain work because it's all going to be underground and the player can't look underground, which means they'll just sort of have to take your word for it, so to speak. But if that were the case here in Kingdom Come Deliverance II, why would they have Henry say that line so many times? So I decided the next move was to expand my search. If there was no obvious water infrastructure like pipes or whatever right next to the fountain, there must be something somewhere in the city, right? I started with the walls of the city because I figured if the source of the water was outside of the city, like some sort of nearby lake or river, there might be some kind of canal or aqueduct coming in through the city walls, but I didn't find anything. Then I decided I would comb through every street within the city to look for water-related clues, and I did stumble across a few interesting things. Firstly, there are the bathhouses like this one here, which obviously use water extensively in order to give people baths. So I assumed that they must also have running water like the fountain, but no, I don't see any faucets or anything else, and you can actually see the exact water-carrying buckets in the back area here that you can find near the fountain, which implies that the water for the bathhouse comes here one bucket at a time. Another thing I found was over here near the market. All the way on the northern end of the road, you can find another little fountain with water coming out of it, and just up the road from it, there's a second one that looks basically identical, which doesn't tell us a ton about where the water's coming from, but it does imply that whatever the water source is, all three of these fountains are probably connected in some way. So for now, let's just add both those fountains to the map and keep looking. Now, I had almost finished with the entire inner city, and I didn't really have much luck when I came across one final little detail. There's a well here in the middle of the city, not very far from the fountain. Now this is interesting, because as we learned in our Where Winds Meet video, a well can only really work if there's an underground reservoir that's large enough to provide near infinite water. You lower a bucket down into it, and then you let it fill and bring it back up. This is how wells work. There's water under the ground. Who would have thought? So a well in the middle of the city implies that there is a source of water under the ground. Okay, but the thing about fountains, I don't know if you know this, is that they squirt water out of their holes. And in medieval Bohemia, they had to do this without electricity. So how would you get water to come out of a fountain like this if the water was below the fountain in a reservoir? Answer: you don't. The only real way for a fountain like this to work is to have the source of the water higher up than the fountain itself. So you let gravity push the water down from here, and then it goes through these pipes and it pushes up and out wherever the fountain is. The thing is though, the water that comes out of the pipe can never go higher than the height of the source of the water. So if you have a big lake here and a fountain here, the water will go through the pipes and flow upwards, but it won't actually go any higher than this point because that's how high the lake is. And if you lower the fountain down too much, like down to here, the water will squirt out of the fountain hard enough that it reaches roughly the same height as the lake. This is called hydrostatic something. I don't really understand it either, so if you're not following, it's fine. You can obviously use like faucets and valves to adjust the pressure a little bit, but broadly speaking, this is how a simple medieval fountain would work, which means that a reservoir buried dozens or hundreds of feet below the ground would have no way to be the source of the fountains in Kuttenberg. Or at least no way in real life. The only way that it could work is if this was obviously a video game and it didn't have to follow the laws of physics, which of course it is, so maybe that could be the explanation, but I really don't think that's the case. I think they put that line of dialogue in the game to tease us because they wanted us to look. And why would they want us to look if they didn't give us anything to find? Now, with the entire city explored, we've kind of reached a little dead end, but I'm not out of ideas yet. Because if the water is coming from somewhere higher up, it should have to enter the city somewhere. So I spent a couple of hours carefully combing along the outside of the city walls, searching for any place where it looked like water might be able to enter the city. And then, when I didn't find anything, I decided to expand my search and head down to the nearby river, because I figured that even if it couldn't technically be the source of the fountain on account of its way lower in elevation than the city itself, we might be able to follow it to wherever Gutenberg's water infrastructure is hidden. I thought about trying to make up some kind of funny bit to make this work better, but I'm currently sick while writing this script. I was sick, so I'm just going to say it. Guess what? Rocket Money. Welcome to the sponsorship. You know what I love about the app Rocket Money? I call it class. Cancel, lower, automate, set budgets, and save money. Class. Rocket Money will help you cancel your unwanted subscriptions. That's like a thing that it does, and it works. I used it. It helps you lower your bills. They can even negotiate your bill down for you. But the features that I really care about are these last three. Okay, we should... But the features that I really care about are these last three. Rocket Money helps so much with automating budgeting. You have to do almost no work once you set it up, including maybe the most underrated feature, which is just the fact that it will alert you when you're spending money. And I feel like so much of like losing track of your own money is like you just aren't aware that you're doing it. And it means that you can't really get away with spending money without sort of having to account for it, which is truly life-changing. I wish you guys would believe me. I know I just sound like your dad, but being in control of your money is the best thing ever. And I promise you can do it even if you don't have that much money. Go to rocketmoney.com/AnyAustin to get started with Rocket Money for free. You know what I always say? You don't have money until you have a budget, and you don't have a budget until you have Rocket Money. rocketmoney.com/AnyAustin. Okay. Fountains. So I started making my way along the river from this point, checking anything along the way that caught my eye. And there's a lot of really cool stuff down here. There's a fully animated rock crusher machine that's powered by a water wheel here, which is crazy. There's a bunch of small man-made dams that cause the water to back up into ponds so they can be used for washing clothes. And maybe my favorite are these ore washing tables. So you have this flowing water which separates out different mining materials like silver and gold, which then can be used for smelting, and then it washes everything else out into the river. And as a fun bonus, these ore washing machines also allow all of those extra heavy metals like lead and arsenic to flow directly into the river, which means that any living thing that drinks from the river will get severe heavy metal poisoning. Wow, they should do that at the Ren Fair. Maybe they already do, that's why all those people act so weird. Anyway, I went up and down this river system about 8 times over the course of an entire afternoon looking for any sign of water entering the city, but there was still nothing. So I decided to head back up to the fountain again to look around and see if I'd missed anything. And on the way back to the fountain, I stumbled across something that wasn't anywhere near the river, but it definitely looked promising. You see this right here? This right here is called an aqueduct, and it is exactly the type of medieval technology that would be used to bring water to a fountain from outside the city. You might recognize these things from the Romans, who had probably the most famous system of aqueducts in the world, which were used to provide water to the citizens of Rome, either for drinking or for bathing or, whatever. But, aqueducts, they exist all over the world in various forms, including ones that are still being used to this day. This one here in KCD2 is made of wood, and it's not quite as grand as the ones that you see from ancient Rome, but it serves the same purpose, which is to move water from one place to another. The thing is, the water in this aqueduct isn't flowing into the city. It's flowing out of the city, which just... This means that they literally have a model in the game of the exact thing that we're looking for, but it's flipped around in the wrong direction. And the funniest thing about it is that this aqueduct with the water coming out of it probably gets its water from the exact same place that the fountain theoretically does, which means we now have a 4th unexplained fountain in a game that makes a point of making us curious about where the water comes from for the fountains. So at this point, we basically only have one other option if we want to figure out the answer to this question option for ourselves, and that is just to literally go to every single water feature in the game and check to see if it's attached to some kind of aqueduct. Like literally one by one, look at every river and lake and pond and just see what we find, which is going to take a long time, but of course that's exactly what I decided to do. You know, I'm no stranger to taking days of my life to make detailed maps of video game river systems, and I figured that at the very least, if I didn't find anything, we could just make a video on that. Obviously, we're not making a video on that, so I did find something. We'll get to that. But while I was working my way through every single tributary in the entire game, I figured that there might be an easier way to answer this question. At least, sort of. If you read through the codex entries in Kingdom Come Deliverance II, which I highly recommend, it'll become clear pretty quickly that for the most part, the world of the game is pretty faithful to the actual history of 15th century Bohemia. Pay attention, Kevin. They took some artistic liberties, and they actually talk about those a lot in the codexes, like why they decided to do things that were ahistorical sometimes because it made the game more fun. But for the most part, all of the cities and towns and geography and people in this game actually existed in the past in some form or another. The lore is not cap, as they say. And one of those things that is historically accurate is that this fountain actually existed and still exists in real life Kuttenberg. It looks a lot different, obviously, because the fountain in the game is from about 100 years earlier than the current fountain was built, but it's here. And we actually know exactly where the real fountain's water came from. It came from a place called St. Adalbert's Spring, and it's right here west of modern-day Kuttenberg, which is now called Kutna-Hora. You can't actually get all the way up to where the spring begins on Google Maps, but it is still active today, and you can find some pictures of it in the reviews for the marker, which clearly shows how the water still flows out from beneath this shrine. Now, because Kingdom Come Deliverance II's map is so close to real life, we can actually make an educated guess as to where this spring should be in the game, which would be right about here, where the red circle is, near the town of Bilani. Now, you can clearly see on the map that there is unfortunately no spring here. And if we actually go to that location in the game, you can see that... Hold the fort. Yeah, so despite the fact that it's not labeled on the map at all, if you come to the exact spot where the source of the Kuttenberg fountain would be in real life, you can find a spring in the game, just like there should be. Okay. At this point, I'm convinced there has to be some other piece of evidence in the game for this aqueduct system that feeds the Kuttenberg fountain. Because listen, I can accept that maybe they put that dialogue in the game just to make us curious or as a little annoying Easter egg, but you're going to tell me that they put the work to add the dialogue for the fountain, and they put 3 other water outlets in the city, and they put a literal exact model of an aqueduct in the city, and they have a secret spring in the exact location that it should be that doesn't actually appear on the map. There's just no way this is all a coincidence. There's no way. But if there is more evidence for this system of aqueducts in the game, how do we find it? Well, obviously, the first thing I want to do is follow this spring to its endpoint, right? So I did that. And it goes down here across this path and into this little pond, which is actually a separate stream that's been dammed down here. And St. Adalbert Spring flows into it from this direction. But if we follow that stream all the way to where it ends, it actually just reconnects to the original nasty lead-polluted river that we looked at earlier. It never actually connects to Kuttenberg itself. So however this water gets to the Kuttenberg fountain, it must do so underground, at least to some extent. And this is basically how aqueducts work in real life too. The Roman aqueducts are sometimes underground and sometimes above ground. It just depends on where their start is. So theoretically, if we were to draw a line from where St. Adalbert's Spring meets the big pond all the way to the middle of Kuttenberg, it would be a pretty safe bet that any in-game evidence of an aqueduct system would be somewhere along that line, because the water has to get from A to B somehow. So I started walking back and forth across the area along that line, foot by foot, looking at every single thing that caught my eye. Every stone, every blade of grass. And believe it or not, it only took about an hour of searching before this happened. Wait. No way. This is an aqueduct. They actually have an aqueduct. It's here. In the middle of nowhere, not marked on the map, not near anything notable. They really did it. They put it in the game. Wow. And if you actually estimate where this aqueduct is headed by following its curvature into the distance, it becomes clear as day. This very aqueduct is headed directly into the great city of Kuttenberg, directly towards the very fountain that we began at. Now, I'd like to tell you that as I continued making my way towards the city, I found a bunch more evidence that helps us build a more certain picture of how all this connects. But as far far as I can tell, this exposed aqueduct is the only thing here, which is still obviously absolutely incredible. But it does leave me with kind of a funny feeling, because as amazing as this all seems, technically we're just talking about 3 unconnected objects here. There's a spring, an aqueduct, and a fountain. All of the evidence that these things are connected is entirely circumstantial. There's no actual concrete mention of them being related in the game itself. So the only way to be absolutely sure that our theory is correct would be to have someone actually get in touch with Warhorse Studios and ask the team that actually built the game. But in order to do that, you would need someone with, a lot of clout, like someone with lots of YouTube subscribers or something, someone that they might want to actually talk to. Anyway, I ended up in a Microsoft Teams call at 8 a.m. on a Monday with the people from Warhorse Studios who, according to Warhorse Studios comm director Tobias, would be the most likely people to actually be able to confirm whether my theory was correct. We ended up chatting for over an hour about a ton of different wonderful things, and I hadn't really prepared them for precisely what I would be asking them. So when it finally came time to confirm my theory about the fountain, something pretty funny happened. They didn't really know the answer at first. Does the water in the Kuttenberg fountain come from St. Adalbert's Spring?
Which one?
Yes.
We can just say yes confidently as well.
Yeah, no one's gonna know. We're not gonna, I'm the only guy checking. They actually had to pause for a second and discuss it amongst themselves, including bringing in the team's historical consultant, Joanna, before coming back and basically telling me that I was probably right. And I know what you're thinking. How could they not know the answer to this? Didn't they literally make the game? Of course they did, but if you think about it, games like KCD2 have about 1,000 little details like this fountain packed into them. So asking the developers about one very specific tiny thing isn't like asking someone about, the day they got married or what the name of their child is. It would be more like if you went up to someone and said, hey, do you remember why you parked your car further down the block than normal in October of 2022? And you'd probably be like, maybe, I think. Wasn't there a parade that day? Or maybe was it my neighbors were having a party and they parked in my usual spot? And then Annie Austin comes in and he goes, why can't you remember? Isn't it your car that you were driving? It's a stupid question. Joanna actually jokingly said that the team at Warhorse, herself included, were all, quote, freaks, and she called it their nightmare that they put so many details into the game because keeping all those things straight in moments like this gets really tricky, which I totally accept. And they did eventually come around and agree that yes, my theory was functionally correct and that the aqueduct was 100% put there as an Easter egg for the fountain. They also confirmed that the water you can find by going into the mines underneath Kuttenberg, which we didn't actually get into, but some of you may have found, is not the same water that's coming out of the fountain. Because it turns out we were also right about the heavy metal poisoning. There was so much mining in Kuttenberg at this time, and it used so much water that the water table near the city was rendered unsafe to drink. And most of it just kept draining away into the mines anyway, so that the wells, like the one we found, wouldn't be able to reach the reservoir anyway. So this is actually polluted groundwater that's draining away from the city as a result of excess mining, which is the whole reason they needed to build a fountain for the city in the first place. They needed to bring clean water from far away all the way into the city so that people could have something to drink. Incredible. But one thing still kind of bugs me about this whole ordeal. If all of this incredible detail, the spring and the aqueduct and the fountain, if this was all really just one of 1,000 things that got added into the game and it wasn't, super notable for them, so they had to think about it for a moment before confirming my theory, why did they take the time to program Henry being so curious about it? That's what gets me. The whole reason I became obsessed with figuring this out is because they had programmed him to repeat that voice line so many times, which meant it must have been something that they would have expected the player to be curious about and to look for. So how could they not remember it right away, So before the call wrapped up, I decided to ask, and their answer made so much sense.
So the cooldown there is for Henry barking, I wonder why that fountain is here, was broken and was never fixed, but it turned out to become a community meme. So when we were about to fix it, we decided not to.
It was a bug, and they were going to patch it, but then it became a meme, and they decided not to patch it. The whole thing that started this journey for me, Henry's incessant curiosity, was just a happy accident. Huh. I'm Annie Austin. Thanks for watching.
Everybody likes me, everybody likes me, everybody likes me.